So in this video I wanted to talk about something that I found really interesting. I found that certain people in the cities of Toronto and London talk quite alike. And when I say London, I'm talking about London, not London, Ontario. To show you what I mean, I'm going to have to explain to you who these people are that sound alike and the types of things they say. I don't know if you guys happen to be familiar with the dialect spoken in London that you can hear in, for example, drill music and shows like Top Boy, but to demonstrate what I'm talking about, let me give you a little clip of the way the social like sounds.
I have got this. I swear down I can get this stick through this door. My mother's life.
I try go sideways, innit? Cause go on.
I do not need your help, bruv. Move out my way, you little pajamas, bruv.
So this dialect is called Jafaican, or Roadman, or Multicultural London English, MLE. But this dialect is not just spoken in London alone, it's spoken around more places in the UK as well, and it's getting a lot of traction recently. So here I'll show you a few examples of some well-known words and phrases used in this dialect.
You.
For example, in MLE, translated into standard American English would translate to young person. So, for example,
That's the you who didn't call me back.
would roughly translate to, that's a person who didn't call me back.
Ting.
Which means thing in standard English, but it can also mean girl or girlfriend
Give me the ting.
in standard English, but give me the thing. But also,
She your ting, mate.
is she your girlfriend, mate?
Wagwan.
Which probably no stereotypical way out of this dialect. It means what's going on.
Can you tell me wagwan?
Can you tell me what's going on?
Bear.
Which means a lot or very.
I spent bare time waiting for the Uber.
I spent a lot of time waiting for the Uber. Or, for example,
I'm bare hungry.
I'm very hungry.
What you saying?
Which means how are you?
What you saying, mate?
How are you, mate? But you can also use it like,
What was the party saying?
how was the party?
Pre.
Means to check out.
You preing me.
Are you checking me out?
Allow.
Which means to leave or forget someone. For example,
Allow them people, they got nothing to say.
forget them, they've got nothing to say. And there's also a whole different pronoun that's frequently used in MLE,
Man.
which you can use in multiple ways. For example,
Man wants to go out.
I want to go out.
The man them over there asking me for a lighter.
Them over there are asking me for a lighter. Here's a list of some of these pronouns that you can see in MLE, with man corresponding to the first person singular pronoun I, man or mans to you, man to he or it, us man to we, you man to the plural you, numan or mandum to them. For reference, this use of an impersonal pronoun is used in other languages as well. For example, in Montreal French, on works as a substitute for man as well, as gente in Portuguese too, or a in African American vernacular English. But to get back to it, let's talk about
A lie.
which is a word used to indicate agreement. For example,
You're coming to school today, a lie.
you're coming to school today, right? Now, it's definitely possible that these words feel really foreign to you if you're not from the UK, but surprisingly enough, a lot of these same words and phrases used in MLE don't feel too far from home to a certain speech community in the city of Toronto. And no, I'm not talking about Toronto Durham, I'm talking about Toronto, Ontario. Yes, Canada. So let me demonstrate that by showing you a clip of someone in the speech community.
What you saying, fam? So what? You're not trying to drop 5 on the sesh, bro? What are you dealing with? It's midweek since we balled up, guy. Man said drop a 5. I'll drop a D.
So here they use similar speaking patterns, and a lot of those same words and phrases I demonstrated earlier also have equivalents in the speech community, like in the words wagwan,
Wagwan.
ting,
Ting.
what you saying,
What you saying?
a lie,
I lie.
ute,
You.
allowed,
Lao.
pre,
Pre.
bear,
Bear.
mun.
Mans.
So these words used in Toronto all have more or less the same meaning as their MLE counterparts. But as you can see here, the pronoun man is a little bit different in Toronto, however. Man is normally replaced by mans. The first person singular pronoun I normally corresponds to mans, but you and he and it also normally correspond to mans. We to us mans or just mans, the plural you to you mans and just mans, and finally them to them mans or mandam. Mandem is the exception here, but you'd still sometimes hear muns them, very rarely. You can see how muns is the preferred form in Toronto. Now, that's not to say that you won't hear some Torontonians use mun instead, which is also used, but mun seems to be the dominant form. So, the way they speak in the speech community spoken in the Greater Toronto area is colloquially called Toronto muns. Most people wouldn't really call it a multicultural Toronto English yet, as this way of speaking has not yet turned into as flashed out of a dialect as Emily is, mostly due to quantitative differences from the baseline speech community in Toronto, aka there's not enough speakers and data. But you'll definitely hear some speech communities use this slang, which is why, as of right now, this way of speaking is more so known as Trenormans, or even Scarboroughmans, as you'll find this way of speaking usually spoken in certain areas such as Scarborough and Brampton, but it's mostly scouted out of the city. And you'll also hear a lot of people saying it's part of Treno English, but I'm just going to refer to this dialect as MTE from now on. So, to get back to the similarities, it might seem like I was cherry picking words that happen to exist in both Treno and the UK, but the list of words continues and the similarities seem to be countless. It just can't be a coincidence, right? So then, how can it be that a city in Canada uses a lot of similar, if not the exact same phrases used halfway across the world in the UK? Is it because they share the same queen? Is it because Treno used to be part of the UK? Well, one possible theory is that the two cities borrow words from each other, as they're both multicultural metropolises who interact with each other. But there's a more likely scenario at play here, the scenario of a third source, a source from which the two places took all of these words. But where might they have come from? So those previous words I'll show you all have equivalent like words from countries in the West Indies. So countries like Jamaica, Trinidad and many more. Here I'll show you guys the similarities first off. I'll use Jamaican patois as an example, which is one of the languages spoken in this region. So Wagwan from Emmeline MTE in patois is
Wagwan,
which also means what's going on. And surprisingly enough, the word youth in Jamaican patois also has an equivalent, well,
youth,
which also means young person. So for example,
my youth, where you go?
Which means friend, where are you going? Ting in patois
Thing,
means thing or girl as well. So for example,
serious thing that happen right now.
which means serious things are happening right now. Or for example,
Yo, see the crosses thing over there, sir.
which means do you see the hut girl over there? Now it's also worth noting that the voiced and voiceless dental fricatives, th and the, don't exist in a lot of Caribbean languages, including Jamaican patois, and are also removed from Emily by means of the so-called th fronting, where the would turn into f and the into the. For example, through, bathe, bathe. What's interesting here is that thing, ting, should be pronounced thing, according to that rule. But a lot of Jamaican English speakers turn that the sound into a t sound. So to give an example, three would be pronounced as tree by a lot of Jamaican English speakers. But we're getting sidetracked a bit. So bear in Jamaica
Beer,
means a lot. For example,
a beer girl in at the party last night.
there were a lot of girls at the party last night. Allow, which in patois
Low,
means to leave.
low me.
Leave me alone. What are you saying in patois?
Where you are, sir?
Which is basically the same thing. Pray in patois,
Pray.
to watch.
Right now, a money man a pray.
Right now, all of us are watching the money. So in that last sentence, you can also see the use of man used in a similar way in Jamaican patois. In the sentence, for example,
Yo, and the man them need for come.
you and the guys need to come. So in patois, dam is a way to pluralise nouns. So man means person and mandam means people. Another example,
Make sure say you get all of the book them.
make sure that you get all the books. Here you can see that dam pluralises books. So you can definitely see the similarities between at least Jamaican patois and Emily MTE, right? Well, it's easy to make the assumption that the two dialects borrowed all these words from the Caribbean languages, right? But how would these words have made their way over from the Caribbean to both Toronto and the UK? So in 2011, 629,000 Canadians identify as ethnically Caribbean, and among those, 308,000 lived in the Greater Toronto Area. That's 5.6% of the Greater Toronto Area. Also, in 2011, 591,000 Caribbean identified people were in England and Wales, and 345,000 of those lived in London. That's 7.1% of the city. Like I mentioned earlier, the slang is spread outside of London as well, but has definitely had the biggest influence in the city. So, as you can see, the cities have similar demographics when it comes to Caribbean influences, and you can see how some of these influences might have dripped into the places, right? Now, this is not to say that all slang words come from the Caribbean, nor from their languages like Jamaican patois. For example, the slang word fam, which is short for family, are often said to be part of both Emily and MTE slang, yet doesn't come from the Caribbean. We have to remember that the two cities are really multicultural and may as well have other influences outside of the Caribbean. So thanks a lot for watching my first proper video. I'm planning to make a lot more in the future. And if you're from Toronto, the UK, or Jamaica, or like any other country, doesn't matter, I'd love it for you guys to leave a comment and talk a bit about what you thought about the video and everything. Yeah? Cheers.